Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining this year's World Model UN Day, where we are going to be having very different panels. So today we're having three speakers, three very experienced and interesting speakers joining us from very different parts of the world, who will be talking about cross-border youth cooperation, about their experiences in this area, and as to how this can be utilized, so to say, for a positive change. So please allow me to introduce the three distinctive speakers that we have very quickly, and then we will go ahead and start our panel. So first and foremost, we're having Victoria Hu. Victoria is a Russian-born Chinese, the co-founder and president of the SCOLAR Network, a platform mission to connect young leaders from the Shanghai Cooperation Organization countries, and has hubs running across 7 countries with a flagship project called Model SCO. Vika is also an adjunct lecturer at Tsinghua University in Beijing, a TEDx speaker, the co-founder of Russian Student Association in China, and a board member of Tsinghua SABRI Student Association. Victoria, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure having you here.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, Tarek.
Thank you. Moving on, our second speaker, Alexander Liubamirovic. Alexander was born in Serbia and graduated from the prestigious Ludwig Maximilians University in Munich, where he obtained 2 Bachelor of Arts degrees. Until really recently, he was serving as the president of Organization of Serbian Students Abroad, one of the largest student networks based in the Balkan Peninsula. In 2020, he was elected as the Young Ambassador of Serbia to the European Commission. He's also the organizer and Secretary General of ISAR-MUN in 2016 in Munich, RGMUN in 2019 in Istanbul. Is the International Secretary and Presidency member of People's Party Serbia. He's fluent in Serbian, German, English, and is currently learning Russian. Alex, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation. It's my pleasure to be here.
Amazing. And finally, we're having Sameh Kamel, Dr. Sameh Kamel, joining us from Egypt. Dr. Sameh is an MBBS graduate from October 6 University with a Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery with honors. Sameh also helped establish the first youth engagement mechanism at an Arab intergovernmental organization in 2018, and he currently serves as the organizing partner for external affairs and international relations at the Arab Youth Platform for Sustainable Development at the League of Arab States. Sameh has been the regional focal point of the Middle East and North Africa at the Major Group for Children and Youth. He facilitated the youth engagement at multiple United Nations intergovernmental negotiations and processes on behalf of this organization. And he's also a teaching assistant of ENT, ear, nose, and throat at the Faculty of Medicine and Surgery of the Modern University for Technology and Information, MTI. Sameh, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing. So after these very interesting introductions, I don't want to take any further of our audience time and just leave the floor to our distinctive speakers. So I'd like to start with a relatively simple and straightforward question. How did you first discover the international side of youth cooperation / activism, however you name it? Because obviously most of you had a level of experience in your own communities, but then it turned out it moved to a more international side of things later on. So how did that first happen? Any of my panel speakers wishing to take the floor, please go ahead.
If the other panel speakers don't mind, I would take the floor first. I first have to say that our generation is really fortunate because we're living in a multipolar world, which tries to embrace diversity and intercultural, interethnic connections. And this is something that was not like this during the generation of our parents. So we are fortunate because we have the opportunity to participate at simulations of the United Nations or simulations of the work of the European Parliament. And at such conferences and simulations, we have the opportunity to meet open-minded people from all countries worldwide. And this is also the first time I've, so to say, connected with people from other countries. And thanks to MUNs, thanks to EYPs and so on, I had the opportunity to travel. I had the opportunity to meet people from every continent, from every single country worldwide, and to definitely break some prejudice that we all have, unfortunately. And because of this, I was lucky because I'm now more open-minded than I was before. I have friends all over the world, and we can discuss about recent issues, and as well we can discuss about new ideas, how to make the world or our regions a better place for everyone to live in.
Amazing, amazing, Alexander. Completely agreed. Anyone else? Vika, I think you were going to say something, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So, well, for me, it was always, I think since I was born, because I was born in a family with two cultures, the Russian and Chinese. And both my parents are ethnically Chinese. So for me, it was already pretty international, although between two countries and cultures. And then I was born and raised in Russia. I came to China to study for my undergrad, and then started Russia Student Association. And I studied in the university, which is one of the most international universities in China, called Beijing Language and Culture University, with students from more than 100 countries, because when we have these cultural festivals, we literally have the entire football stadium covered with all the different booths. And later on, when I started SCOLAR Network, which is a community for young leaders from the Shanghai Cooperation Organization countries, it originally started with 6 countries, 5 of them Russian-speaking countries and China. But later on, as SCO expanded with Pakistan and India, and we decided to also take more youth from and invite, I would say not take, but invite more youth from other countries, and at the same time expand to the region. And right now it's 21 countries. So for me, that was always the journey. And as a foreigner and Chinese at the same time in China, I was always exposed to both of these communities. And the international community in Beijing, at least, is quite a melting pot. So I would say it was always the case for studying, for working, and just for hanging out. Because when you are a foreigner in the country, then automatically all of the foreigners have this hashtag, and all of the foreigners become friends just because you're a foreigner in China or in other countries. So this is how originally started, and it's still going.
Amazing. I think inclusivity is like a common theme, both in what Alex told and what you just added, Victoria. Inclusivity and the common understanding. Very, very nice. All right. So to move on to the second question, which is going to be a little bit more MUN specific, but still, I believe, interesting enough to some of our speakers. So most of you, including myself, to be honest, either directly took part in a Model UN conference or a similar model simulation, like the Model SCO we just mentioned, conferences, and even organized some. So in this regard, what do you think of the role Model UN plays in the world of international youth cooperation, so to say? Because sometimes it's considered more of a local activity for wherever this is being organized. But I think there's a much more international side to it. So I would like to know your opinions on what you believe is the role of Model UN in all of this international or cross-border youth cooperation.
If I may go first, I'm someone that is very passionate about education. But education doesn't have to be just in a classroom. So you need to learn about current events. You need to learn about how the world works. But the typical style of learning, which is a classroom teacher style, is no longer the most effective method, proven by statistics. So you need to get more interactive, more engaged in current events. But to be more realistic, how can you engage in, let's say, an Egyptian-Libyan situation? You can't, like you can't actually be part of that. But you can have a simulation in which you pretend to be, and you pretend to be the, let's say, the Prime Minister of Egypt, or like whatever position, the ambassador of one of the countries to the UN. And then you can start preparing a speech, and that speech has to be aligned. That way you would learn more about the topic than what you would in a classroom, because you're doing your own research. You are speaking as if you are the ambassador of that country. So that is an excellent learning opportunity. To be honest, my first encounter with MUN was at the age of 16. I was still in high school. And I didn't know much about the UN. I didn't know much about anything. It was just a high school club that, all the cool kids joined. So I wanted to be with the cool kids. So I decided to join MUN. But then that changed my life. From then, everything was like, from that day, nothing has been the same. I've been part of the actual UN since 2011, just a couple of years after that. And I got to take part in actual negotiations, actual intergovernmental negotiations. And thanks to MUN, I was properly trained. I properly had the experience of how to sit at the UN, how to draft a concept note or a policy paper, a position paper, or how to draft a speech. All that basic stuff you learn at MUN. So that is my point of view on MUN.
Very interesting. A lot of elements of personal development, certainly. Oh yeah, Alexander.
Yes, definitely, and I would definitely agree with Sameh. And MUNs are really important in areas such as Northern Africa, for example, or the Balkans, where I'm from. And when you organize a Model United Nations conference, for example, in Belgrade, and students, young people from Bosnia, from Croatia, from Albania, from Macedonia, from all the countries in the region come to Belgrade, and we somehow connect more. We break the borders and start building bridges again that were destroyed during the 90s. And this is a really important role of not only MUNs, but similar conferences as well, because they, in the end, connect people and give the future leaders the chance to be smarter and to learn from the past, and do not repeat the mistakes that happened several decades ago.
Indeed, building bridges. I really like that metaphor you used there, which just gives a very good understanding of what MUN is all about. Inclusivity, and definitely building bridges to have the kind of conversation that perhaps our, as you said, a few generations above us were not able to have. So yeah, definitely agreed with that. So taking it from there to another similar question, which is more about the practical implications of Model UN, if there are any, of course. So do any of you believe that Model UN or similar activities, again, or similar simulations, can possibly be utilized for positive change?
If I may take the floor to start. Yes, well, I want to start by mentioning that I personally didn't, unfortunately, participate in Model UN, but it was a big deal in the university, both during my undergrad and master's, and in quite a lot of the universities. And the reason why we've started Model SCO, one of the key reasons is the inspiration that came from Model United Nations. And I think a lot of the students participate in Model United Nations, and therefore create a certain trust system, both towards each other and towards the United Nations. And for me, that was the inspiration that I wanted to take to Model SCO, where people would feel that, oh, this is not just the international organization where presidents meet and discuss something, but this is also the organization which can bring solutions on the table. And at the same time, I wanted them to, with the team, of course, we developed the whole structure but learned a lot really from Model United Nations, where you can learn and be inside the mechanisms of the SCO, because they're quite different from the United Nations, and understand better that all these meetings, they are actually hard to take because negotiations are involved, and there is the consensus that has to be made within the SCO, which is the only rule but the hardest rule, meaning that each country is equal no matter how big or small this country is. And at the same time, you create the trust between people. And the other aspect of it is talking about positive change. I think information, and I do believe that information is the most valuable thing right now in general. And ideas are something that both diplomats and decision makers and businesses are looking for to solve the pressing issues, whether in climate change or other niches and industries. And young people, by coming together, representing different countries, doing the research and presenting their ideas, are actually giving very good suggestions for the problem-solving issues, for the issues that are needed to be solved in the country. And whether they're going to be implemented or not in the future, that has already put them into the process of thinking that this is the mindset that I, as a young person, will apply in the future in my work towards problem-solving and discussion and solutions. So this would be my take on it.
Samir, please.
I would like to add on what Vicky just said. All what you said is amazing. And not just that they take their suggestions, you are allowed to sit down and negotiate with member states at the United Nations. Of course, it's a very complicated process, but at the end of the day, you have a chair to sit down and negotiate. But no one will take you seriously if you don't know the basics. These people have been practicing for years. But where's your practice? You're a young team that is probably in your like 14, 15, 18 years old that is present to negotiate a very important agenda that will be implemented on, like it will be adopted by the General Assembly or the ECOSOC or whatever. So this was my case. We helped negotiate the SDGs. We helped negotiate the new urban agenda. So we actually saw the fruit of MUN at the actual UN. Not just that as a simulation and we're learning from practicing, but we actually got to practice and we saw the fruits of that.
Very, very interesting. And actually, it is interesting not only because of the context and the content of what you both of you said, but it's also because there's so much parallel in what you're saying to what Mr. Lukatov, the former UNJ president, was also telling me, that especially in terms of what Wika touched upon, that this is the kind of a process where you see that this isn't only about intergovernmental negotiations. This is a process where NGOs are involved, businesses are involved, youth is involved, not just because of like the ethical side of the idea that this is something noble that we're trying to do, but it's also that it's a beneficial thing, that businesses actually realize that these problems that the governments are discussing is in their interest if they take a part in all of this process. If they don't tackle the climate change, then yes, climate change isn't only going to touch upon the governments, it will eventually come back to these businesses as well. So on one hand, it is interesting, but on the other, this parallel way of seeing an actual diplomat and the young leaders here speaking in a very parallel manner is really interesting.
Yes, I just shortly wanted to add that it is really important that from a small age, like let's say not like when we're children, but when we're students, we're also really, really young. And it's really important that at this crucial age, we learn to understand one another. We learn about each other's cultures, traditions, mentalities, because when you're older, when you're 50 or 60 and you're the official of your country and representing your country, you already have a formed opinion about others. And it's really tough. It's really difficult to reverse this opinion about another country. So this is why the role of MUNs is so important. It tells us that at the crucial age, we have the opportunity to really understand one another, understand the point of views of others. And this is really, really important. So understanding and opportunity.
Totally agree. And creating those platforms which can give us the opportunity to have that dialogue to perhaps improve that mutual understanding. Definitely, definitely true. So the next question is more about the United Nations itself, rather than just the Model UN as an activity. How do you see the current level of UN's engagement with youth in general? It can be in the countries that you're connecting from. It can be in general from the other places where you're following, perhaps. So how do you see the level of UN engagement with the youth, and how do you think could it be amended in order to make it more inclusive, perhaps?
I can start if I may. So I would just like to give you a little bit of history. In 2005, there was not as much youth representation at the UN. So that was the birth of something called ICMU, the International Coordination Meeting of Youth Organizations. ICMU was, let's say, an alliance of the largest in number youth groups in the world that came together and were like, we want our voices represented at the UN. There was no formal mechanism for youth to engage at the UN at the time. Just a number of NGOs with ECOSOC consultative status that came together and wanted to strengthen the voices of youth. Let's fast forward a few years until 2011. Former Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, recognized the importance of youth, especially with in the light of the Arab Spring and like everything that was happening in the Arab region at the time. So that there was a recognition for the voices of youth, and that was the appointment of the first ever United Nations Secretary General's envoy on youth, Mr. Ahmed Al-Hamdawi, a very dear friend of ours that did an excellent job on connecting the United Nations to youth. And then from there, 1992, and then following up on that in 2012, the actual creation of the United Nations Major Group for Children and Youth, which is the General Assembly mandated space for children and youth to engage at the United Nations. We actually got a table, we got a seat at the table. We got our voices heard. We are allowed to finally take part in intergovernmental negotiations. We're allowed to present our priorities to the General Assembly, to the Security Council. Ever since then, there are 3 Security Council resolutions focused on youth. That is all an excellent starting point. But ever since COVID started, and even like just a few months before that, we have noticed an alarming decrease in youth representation by the UN. A few of our, let's say, rights that they think privileges are taken. We're not allowed to, attend as many negotiations as we were. We're not allowed to attend as many processes as we were. We're not allowed to give as many speeches as we were. So our role is kind of shrinking over time. Instead of just having a 0 point that we're moving forward from, we're moving back. And that is something that we're fighting for. And hopefully with the support of a large number of member states, it's a battle that we are going to win.
If I may actually just add a quick follow-up question to you, Samir, before we move on to our next speakers. So yes, you said that there's a bit of a shrink going on. There's a bit of a backward process happening despite all these positive developments that you just mentioned. What do you think can now, at the to address the status quo, be done to reverse this process somehow? Or do you think, is there anything that could be done at this moment, or is it also a matter of time?
So it is a matter of time, but we need to reach out to our embassies, our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or like the ministry in charge of UN representation. And they need to know that our voices need to be heard. This is something I'm doing in the Arab region. Very, very often I have a meeting with, like either the foreign minister or someone representing the foreign ministry in one of the 22 Arab countries. We sit down together, we talk about, our priorities and how can we support each other, either us as the regional caucus coordination of the Middle East at the major group, or you as a member state, how can you support us or you support youth of your country? They understand that youth are they can no longer be ignored like pre-2011. Youth were ignored for a very long time. And then, like a volcano erupted. The entire region was destabilized because youth were ignored. I'm not saying, or I'm not trying to say that we can do that again. That was, in my opinion, that was not a successful example. Yet, not taking priorities of youth seriously is alarming. Looking at the population pyramid in the Middle East, youth represent over 66%. That's 2/3 of the population are under the age of 30. If you ignore these, will you just focus on 1/3 of the population? So under the age of youth, priorities and voices cannot be ignored.
Indeed, a very interesting point about youth representation. Alex, I think you were about to say something.
Yes, there is currently, or in the last decade, a rising number of young people with tertiary education, college-educated people, and of course, with the rising number of college-educated people, the pressure on institutions is growing. The young people have the impression that they can change something for the better and that their voice needs to be heard. In my opinion, the UN has definitely tried to change something for the better and to somehow include the young even more. And there's also one great initiative. The young ambassador of the United Nations. So not every country, approximately around 60 or 70 countries worldwide, of course recognized by the UN, have their own youth ambassador to the United Nations. And this ambassador goes several times during their one-year mandate to the United Nations headquarters and needs to represent the situation within the youth sector in their respective countries. So this is one ideal, perfect way for the UN to inform themselves about the situation in the youth sectors, about every country that's participating in this program. Of course, this program needs to be widened to every country recognized by the UN, and I think this is also the goal of the United Nations in the upcoming decade. So I think there has been a lot of initiatives. The UN is more open to hearing our voices and sees the youth as some kind of stream of change. But I think that in the next, let's say, 1 or 2 decades, this will be even further improved.
Please, Vika.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to add that, in my opinion, United Nations is the organization which set up the model of the international organization for quite a lot of the international organizations around the world. Since it was created, one of the earliest, and it has the most number of countries. So in my opinion, my personal humble opinion, UN had actually did quite a lot of work in the past 70 plus years by setting up all the different mechanisms that can enable young people included to be part of it. Imagine if you have so many countries on board, how do you even come to one conclusion and solution? So by creating UNESCO and UNFDP and all of the different mechanisms, young people have actually more opportunities to either join directly and as interns or full-time employees, or at least apply. So at least you have this opportunity to be part of it. For example, in China, there was a program called Movers just last year, and it is run by the United Nations. I forgot which department, but I think it was UN Women, but I might be mistaken. So, and Movers was the program that is dedicated for young people, for the future young leaders. And like setting mechanisms is crucial. And then the other part that I believe UN is doing quite great, and other organizations, and not even international organizations, it's just NGOs and companies can learn to do better. Those who are interested in, or social enterprises, to do more social impact related work, are the Sustainable Development Goals, because this is basically the guideline for everybody who wants to be somehow involved in the UN or UN related initiatives, to take the action and do something with that regard in their capacity. And I've seen all the universities and organizations always addressing the panels, oh, we're going to address a certain SDG goal. But without these guidelines, it would not be possible to connect. So in my opinion, well, UN is doing quite a lot, and there's definitely more, and there's always room to improve, but there's a lot to learn.
Totally agree, Vika. And I think you touched upon a very symbolic side of it as well, by saying that UN served as an example to a lot of other international organizations. So it is, and it should be serving as an example for youth inclusivity as well, which I think is a very, again, symbolic aspect of the United Nations, that it's the leader in intergovernmental, let's say, level of negotiations, and it could and it should, also be an example when it comes to youth involvement or youth inclusivity as well. So totally agreed. Moving on to another question, where I'd, of course, if possible, if there are any, I'd like to hear a bit of your memories. I mean, all of you have spent years and years in your local communities and at the international level as well. Some of you are representing your own countries and gain a lot of experience. So I'd like to know if you have a memory of a time when a youth cooperation, perhaps movement dash activity, depending on how you name it, which you may or may not have been a part of, was actually able to achieve an outcome in addressing or in finding a solution to a problem of any given community.
Okay, if I may start. So, as you already mentioned in the introduction, I was until recently the president of the Organization of Serbian Students Abroad. And the Balkan Peninsula has a specific issue, which it's trying to combat and tackle in the previous decades. So there is a huge percentage of brain drain, and a lot of educated young people are leaving the peninsula, going to the east or to the west. They don't choose. And one of the initiatives of my organization was to find appropriate jobs and appropriately paid jobs in Serbia, in the bigger and smaller towns for these students, so they don't leave the country, or if they studied abroad, so that they can return more easily to the country and find a job when they come back to Serbia. And this is an initiative which started 4 years ago, and recently we officially announced that our platform is finished, and over this platform we connect the youth to private firms, but also official institutions, civil sector, and so on. And now the youth in our country can more easily find jobs, and I hope that this will affect the brain drain issue in the upcoming years. So this is something really, really important, because countries, for example, like Estonia, Singapore, or Israel, built their countries by giving students who studied abroad at prestigious universities the chance, the opportunity to change something for the better in their respective countries. And last summer, this was also one huge success. Last summer, we organized a big conference in Belgrade where we invited the representatives of all the bigger youth organizations from the region. And we signed a memorandum, a protocol, which stated that we will work together in the upcoming years to combat this issue of brain drain in the whole region. And I think this is one of the best youth initiatives that has been started in the previous years on the Balkans. And it serves as a small light at the end of the tunnel and gives the youth opportunity, a hope that they will find jobs, appropriate jobs after finishing their university education. And this is definitely one of the 3 or 4 biggest issues of Serbia and the whole Balkan Peninsula, the youth unemployment. And by tackling this issue, I hope that we will do something definitely good for the country and serve as a positive example to other youth organizations in the region and on the whole continent.
Thank you, Alexander. And yes, there is certainly a light at the end of the tunnel. I can't say if it's big or small. I think for as long as there's light, there's hope. But yeah, definitely agreed. Vika, please.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to mention one movement that everybody is very much aware of. It's called TEDx, which in my opinion also achieved quite big significant outcome. In the sense that TEDx is, as we'll know, independently organized conferences under the brand, under one brand. And talking again about the guidelines, TED has developed all these guidelines, how to organize the event. But when I was a part of TEDx, specifically in 2018, that was in one of the cities in the south of China, and was TEDx Yaohu. I was part of the event, which was really independently organized by students. And I think what TEDx enabled many of the young people around the world is to have a platform where they can have a very much well-known brand. They can learn all the skills in terms of the event organization, finding the sponsors, the venue, getting the tickets, the big event that was attended by 150 young people, and not only young, but just 150 people. So running the whole thing from idea to execution, including the content, coming up with the topics, and then the technical part of it. I think this is quite amazing. And I do believe that a lot of young people who organized TEDx or have this experience, both as speakers, organizers, volunteers, and just participants, benefited a lot from it. And that's one of the main reasons probably why it is so successful around the world.
Certainly. And I think the aspect about the organizational experience, that this isn't only something where the speakers gain the experience of addressing a certain audience, or an audience gaining experience listening to interesting people, but there's a whole backstage side to this where, again, a good number of people actually gain a lot of organizational experience, certainly. But yeah, thank you both for sharing these really interesting examples from your own perspectives. So moving on, I will be addressing, so to say, a speaker-targeted question to each of you, mostly depending on your personal background, on your personal experiences, to get a bit more of a personal or personalized answer, so to say. So if that's okay, I'll start with Vika. So Vika, you've organized model SEO conferences, which is something we touched upon at the beginning of this panel. Model Shanghai Cooperation Organization conferences, and these were in fact recognized by the SCO Prime Ministers both in 2018 and 19, which isn't something that happens very often with youth events and these kind of model simulations. So apparently it was a huge success. So considering the region-specific side of model SEO, that this is specifically for the SCO countries and their youth in that regard, what do you think are some of the aspects in which this specific activity contributed to the youth cooperation, youth engagement, youth diplomacy. You may choose whichever definition you like in this given region.
Thank you so much, Sark, for your question. Model SCO, we're definitely really humble to receive the support from the Prime Ministers of the SCO, and that just gives us more push and motivation to continue doing that, or at least knowing that what we're doing is going into the right direction. And in terms of the impact that Model SCO had produced over the past 11 conferences in total, but 8 of them were our Scholar flagship conferences. I would say that it really evolved within the years, starting from the conference that was attended mainly by the member and observer states of the SCO, which are 12 countries, and the representatives from these countries, to growing into the event or simulation where we have students from various countries participating and representing different countries. So meaning that it's not only targeting the SCO citizens, but also the broader just youth to be engaged in this simulation. And there are a few things. So number one, they learn about mechanisms of the SCO, which you cannot, you can read on the website and on official kind of news media, but being part of that process is the whole different process. And we do a lot of trainings for the delegates. We do the whole selection period, the selection process with the interviews and applications. And I think you guys are all very much familiar with that. And then, so they learn about SCO and how, what are the countries of this organization, what are their statuses, how do they collaborate together, and what are the national interests of these countries that they represent based on the topic, whether that's youth diplomacy or e-commerce or digital economy or entrepreneurship. Each time we have a different topic that they need to dive deep into in terms of the research. And then when we talk about the second aspect, which is learning the academic preparation for it, you have to, and diplomacy, you have to understand how can I representing, I am somebody who is, let's say, from Tajikistan, and I represent India. How can I learn about these national initiatives and have them or some of the ideas of them represented and being implemented in the whole SCO region, and having other countries agree on that. So negotiations is another crucial skill set that delegates learn. And in our experience, by organizing so many model SCOs, the negotiations and discussion could take as short as 3 hours and as long as the whole day. Because in fact, the whole day isn't even enough. We start at 9 a.m., we finish at 3 p.m., and we still have some of the initiatives that were not discussed. So, and then networking for sure, because you get to learn with your team members, that your fellow delegates, you get to know other delegates. So you really build that trust between youth. And I believe that trust is built only when you spend significant time together. And especially if you have a common goal, because you're working on a paper, you're working on this proposals. And at the core of it, at the core of Model SCO concept is empathy. We put empathy at the core of it because that's the event, that is the event, a project where you have to really put yourself in the other person's shoes in order to understand their perspective, and then come to this certain conclusion. Because if you wouldn't do that, if you're not able to listen to what other people are saying, then you'll not be able to come to any common solutions, and you'll not be able to come to consensus. And I think dialogue and having the empathetic approach is the key in any diplomatic or not business related negotiations. And we hope that young people who are who were part of Model SCO can bring it to their future approach and work.
So much, a very, very impressive background of how all of this is being run and what the goals were. And I just put like a star next to the word empathy while I was listening to you, because I really think it is really important, not only for these events, but also for the future of these organizations, of these initiatives. So yeah, like a 2 stars next to that word. Anyways, moving on. The next question I'd like to address is for Alexander. Alex, you took part in definitely numerous Model UN conferences. In fact, one where both of us were chairs as a part of the same conference. And later on, you were elected as the Young European Ambassador of Serbia, of your own country. So do you think your previous experiences in the world of Model UN, in different capacities, I mean, you were an organizer as well, contribute to this latter position as an official youth ambassador of your country? And if it did contribute, then in what ways do you think was this contribution?
So yes, definitely. My previous experience helped me a lot when I later decided to apply for the Young European Ambassador. And I would say that the learning experience, the learning process of the Model United Nations has been the crucial one here, because it has taught me how to be a good diplomat, how to listen to others, how to understand others, and this is also really important for a young European ambassador. So this program was initiated by the European Commission for the first time in 2020 for the Western Balkan region. And as I have already mentioned, the Western Balkan region is a war-torn region where there is a lack of understanding and there's a lack of reconciliation between one another. And in order to be a young European ambassador, you need to have, so to say, you have to know how to listen to others. You have to know how to understand what is hurtful for others. And only a person who has these like diplomatic experience and this diplomatic knowledge can listen successfully to others. So what MUNs have definitely taught me is to try to work with others. Although I have my own interest, my country has my own has its own interest, and of course I'm a representative of Serbia. But if we want to work towards reconciliation, we at least need to understand one another and find a common goal of common, let's say, term, and come to terms with each other. And this is something that at our age is difficult to learn. So I had this fortune to participate in MUNs and learn from other more experienced MUNers and become at this really young age a person that can listen to others, understand others, and work towards reconciliation. So as Sameh told us already here, and I would definitely agree with him, this learning process of MUNs is really, really important. You not only put yourself in the shoes of your own country, you put yourself in the shoes of other countries. And sometimes you cannot even, you can't choose the country, you get assigned a country. And I think that's even better. For example, if you, as a Serb, get assigned, for example, a country such as Bosnia or Albania, you research and you try to understand their point of view. And this is a crucial thing in the MUN world. And this is something that prepares you for life afterwards, not only for a diplomatic or political career, but this prepares you for life itself. Because life is not only politics and diplomacy diplomacy life is, like I already said, breaking borders and building bridges. And I'm constantly using the term building bridges because this is a term used by the Nobel Prize winner for literature from our country in 1961. Ivo Andrić, he was the first one who initiated this term of building bridges, and this is why we from Serbia need to embrace this term and try to build bridges that were broken in the region and also towards the world.
And it's a very symbolic, beautiful metaphor, I would say, that you're using there. And then I love it. And of course, the side of it, of having these lifelong soft skills, if I may use this term to everything that you just described, is a really important aspect, because as you said, a lot of us are going to be in the foreign service or in an international organization, but all of us will certainly, at one point or the other, will need these skills, these aspects that we learn. So thank you, Alex, for that. And finally, a question for Samer. Which I hope you wouldn't mind the question. So in the world of Model UN or these similar platforms, there is sometimes this, and I want to emphasize, wrong belief in many people that if you're from a STEM background, medical science, biology, chemistry background, or engineering background, you don't have much to bring to the table. Unfortunately, this wrong belief. So considering all these diplomatic roles that you have undertaken and you're currently undertaking, at your own country in the region, what would you say about this perception, and how do you think your academic background contributed to all these other roles that you're currently undertaking?
That's a very excellent question, Tarek. It's a very wide misconception that STEM backgrounds are not prepared to take on a diplomatic role or like take part in the political life in any sort of way. Using an example of the pandemic, everything was according to WHO standards, and WHO employs people from medical backgrounds. So that is one thing that the entire world was dependent on people from STEM backgrounds. Another thing, the new urban agenda. You can't just have politicians sit down together and negotiate the new urban agenda. A better example, the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. It was a participatory approach. So everyone sat down together and spoke on their area of expertise. Okay, none of these, let's pretend that none of these agendas existed, and all the agendas are for people from political backgrounds. But am I not a citizen of the world to have my opinion heard? Do I not deserve to voice out my concerns? Absolutely, I do. So you don't have to have a political background in every in every prospect. No, I don't have a political background. I never studied politics. I am a doctor and I'm a teaching assistant. And I never studied politics. I never worked in politics before joining the UN major group or the League of Arab States and all that. Yet we made major contributions to global agendas that are today being implemented globally, and all member states of the UN or of the League of Arab States have adopted. So thank you for bringing up the question, Tarek. The answer is no, you don't. Yes, you can be from a STEM background and still contribute to global agendas.
Definitely, certainly agreed with you. And thank you for giving that insight of how that feels from your perspective, or perhaps from your colleagues' perspective as well. So that was a very interesting panel with all of you. And before we leave, just as like a concluding question that I would like to address to all three of you, if possible, with a quick answer. So what is the one thing that Alexander was actually just touching upon that you believe contributed the most to your personal development as a person, independent from all of the other diplomatic or volunteering roles that you're undertaking, to your personal development while taking all these initiatives that you believe you will keep with you later in your life, regardless of what role you will be undertaking or what position you would be in? So I'll just go in the order of my screen if that's okay. So I'll start with Vika. What do you think, Vika, is the one skill, one contribution to your personal development in that regard?
Well, thank you. This is honestly a very hard question because for me, all the different roles and the entire youth engagement has been something through which I really found my passion. Because for me, volunteering was always something on the side, which I wanted to become my passion. And now it is, since I'm running Scholar full time. So I'm really a lucky person who does, for whom work equals passion. And I would say that one thing that I learned over the years is just being patient and doing a lot of things and taking the actions. But in the long run and in the bigger picture, being patient in the outcomes and just enjoying the process and not being afraid to take risks and try new things and dream big, because there will be people who will support you. So that's something that I take with me every day. Amazing.
Being patient and enjoying the process, that addition, the enjoying the process part, I think is quite a symbolic one. Alexander, if I may address the same question to you, what do you think would be that one thing?
Definitely open-mindedness and breaking prejudice. Without any reservation, I would say this is something that I have learned the most, and I really hope that not only people who are participating in MUNs, but also others will learn about open-mindedness and breaking prejudice in other ways. And this is something that is really, really important. And thanks to this open-mindedness, I have friends all over the world now. And I think that only by having an open mind, only then you are able to connect with other nationalities, with other ethnicities, and this is something the world needs desperately. This is something that we never had throughout history, and I think the 21st century can be a breaking point for this, and I think we can start towards open-mindedness and also towards a more multi-ethnic, multicultural world, a world that has more understanding for one another. And this, yes, like I said, something that I carry with myself from MUNs, from every single MUN. And I hope that there will be other initiatives as well, like MUNs, where you can really break prejudice and learn about open-mindedness. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Alexander. Open-mindedness and hopefully further dialogue as well. Samer, to address the same question to you, what is the one thing for you?
In addition to patience and open-mindedness, mine would be consistency. You believe in something that you're fighting for. You keep going no matter what faces you. When I was a bit younger, my dad told me a quote that he still tells me until today. He told me, aim for the moon, and if you miss, you will still be among the stars. I always tell my students that today, and I teach them to aim big. If you plan, then have a big plan. Don't just plan a minor event that would benefit like 2 or 3 or 5 people. Plan something big. Plan something that will change a lot of lives. Plan something that would actually make a huge impact. So consistency is key. Thank you.
Thank you, Samer, and thank you all three of you for these interesting points. Victoria, Alexander, and Samer, thanks for joining us. It was a privilege, a pleasure hosting you, having you at the World Model UNDA platform, and we really hope to maintain this connection and hope to have you here in the future again. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.